Hey guys, what's going on? It's Roth and Joshua here to talk about the Arrow Season 3 finale. So if you haven't watched it, get out of here.
Spoiler warning.
We're going to talk about spoilers. Well, what he said, we're going to have a spoiler warning. So just to kick it off right away, what'd you think? Overall thoughts?
It wasn't my favorite.
And that's the end of our review.
It didn't do it for me. I thought on just a lot of different levels, everything like the characters, like their behavior, to like the plot, to just the things that happened, the sort of the setup, the structure of this finale.
You're basically naming every element of
every element of a story. It felt, repetitive. It felt kind of like overly like melodramatic, and it felt like illogical a lot of the time. I mean, there were a couple like things I liked here and there, but overall, they like didn't do it for me.
I would say, the one word that you said that I really agree with is repetitive, and I think that one of the issues this season for Arrow is that it's sort of lost its way about how to propel the story forward, right? So ultimately, what's happened for the last 3 seasons is they've done a very similar arc, where they've built up this nemesis for Oliver, and then they've had a big battle at the end, and the battle at the end also included a big threat to the city, like a desire to destroy his city, which like with Malcolm, it made sense where he was coming from, and even with Slade, that was a great relationship because it was so personal. It was that tale of like they had been brothers and now they're torn asunder and they're mortal enemies, and it had sort of an emotional weight to it. This season, which you would think like this is the nemesis of all nemesis, like this has got to pay off. They weren't able to capture sort of the weight that they were last season. It didn't have the sense of consequence. It didn't have the forward momentum. And so when he was like, yeah, you've got to destroy your city, and you're like, again?
Yeah.
It just feels like the same thing that we've seen the last couple of seasons.
Yeah. Especially, we saw in the previous seasons, we sort of saw the city under siege. Like the earthquake machine was like shaking into pieces. The superpowered goons were like overrunning the city.
And now
this one, it's
disease.
like there are a couple people out there who have this thing, and then they sort of like very kind of easily isolated them and took care of the problem. So I didn't really feel like the city was at threat. But does the city have to be at risk of being destroyed, like you said, again? Like can they come up with something different, like a different kind of threat? You know what I mean?
I think they need to come up with a different overall season arc than they've done. They cannot do the same thing again next season.
Yeah.
They can't.
They can't just pick a villain and have him be the big
technically
threat.
they can. It's their job,
well,
and
yes.
they're in control. But I hope that they don't do that.
Yeah. They need to start, doing a different formula for the episode. But my problem with Raw is it was if on top of it not being personal, just like their showdown at the mid-season finale was so good, right? That sword fight and the consequences was. But this time, it almost felt like it was like a practice fight. Like it wasn't intense. Like the actual choreography wasn't as impressive as it was before. I wasn't like worried because I already killed Oliver once before. I didn't think they were going to do it again, which is why I was like. He's like, oh, I'm gonna sacrifice myself, and then after the fight, he gets like shot off the bridge, and you think, oh, he's gonna die, and then he gets saved, and it's like, oh, what are you doing? Like we've already hit these beats. Like, give me something new.
Yeah, I will say that I really, really loved the mid-season finale, and it sort of got me hyped for the second half of the season, and going like, oh, this is gonna be great. Like this is gonna be awesome, and then it just sort of didn't, for me, totally find its way. And then the other thing that was a little strange, and I mentioned this to you earlier, is like. Oliver being like, I gotta go down with the plane. Like, how many times has this guy gotta be like, I gotta die for X? Like, I gotta die for my sister, for the city, whatever. Like, at a certain point, you're like, you need a therapist because this is just suicidal behavior at this point. You know what I mean? This is like death by a League of Assassins and stuff. And I do think that they're falling back on a few sort of tried and true moments and tropes. Also, the back and forth between he and Felicity at a certain point.
Oh boy, I think that's sort of my biggest problem with this season is that Felicity became an unlikable character. And for me, the first 2 seasons, she was the reason to watch the show. Yeah. You know what I mean? But now she's just.
I don't know if she's unlikable.
I feel like she's a lot. She has like low energy, and she's like very melodramatic, always on the verge of tears. And I'm like, come on, like let her be like Felicity. Let
Like
her be
fun and quippy. I agree.
Yeah,
That was one
and-
thing that bothered me too. I was like, she is crying so much. This is
Yeah.
not our Felicity.
Yeah, of course, characters can see dark times and have like dramatic like times in their life, but she should still keep her energy about
Yeah.
her and respond to that in the Felicity way, not in sort of like the old like cliched kind of way.
Yeah, and I mean, you're right. Be like, she has been through a lot, but there is something about it that we were responding to in that character, and I still love Felicity, but that sort of lost its way this season because I think the writers were so worried about how to figure out if and how to get them together. And they've said that Arrow is more of a soap than Flash, which I think it worked well. Sort of like that was done well in the first couple of seasons, and even for parts of this season. But then it just became truly very soap opera-y.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also like in the finale, the one thing that really did not make sense to me was why he gave Malcolm the title of Ra's al Ghul, because I was like, he's
Terrible
already,
idea.
Yeah, like where does that make sense? Like you should give it to Anissa. Like
Yeah.
I mean, is it the only way to make him happy and sort of keep him out of your hair? I don't know, because he already tried to destroy the city once and almost succeeded.
Yeah.
But why would you it's like setting up a villain for, I guess there's your season 4 villain.
Yeah. Malcolm again.
Yes.
And that's the thing is like, I think that it was obvious that was the deal that they made. And that's like, he needed Malcolm in order to accomplish his goals and save the city and da-da-da-da. And so that's why I did it. But it's like, man, you're trading one really bad idea for another,
Yeah.
And maybe he was just backed into a corner, but it's so unlike Oliver to be like, well, now that I've created this really bad villain who's got all this power, I'm going to drive off into the sunset. Peace out, And obviously that won't last very long if we know Arrow. I feel like we've been really, really negative. What are some things that you liked? I do love Malcolm as a character, I will say that, and I'm glad they've been able to continue to utilize him in a way that I think actually does make sense, because I think he's great. Is there anything you liked about it?
I can't even think of anything right now.
Well, I'll still tune in, and I'll hope that I think that they lost their way a little bit this season and weren't able to sort of recapture the magic of the first couple of seasons, and so they just tried to repeat some things, hoping that it would work. I think it's a tough thing as showrunners and creators to find a way to propel these characters forward, but still, he's got to be the Arrow, right?
Yeah,
and that's got to
he'll be
continue
back.
to make sense.
I'll tune in.
I'll tune in too. He'll be
Hoping
back.
for a brighter future. Or hopefully a darker one. So
You're hoping for a darker future
Yes.
that makes sense.
Yes.
All right, guys, let us know what you think in the comments below. Did you like the finale? Did you not? What did you like? What did you not? Things like that. Yada, yada, yada. Keep it here on IGN.